Our next speaker this afternoon is Steve Baker, who works for the East Riding of Yorkshire County Council and is heavily involved with both YORhub and the National Association of Construction Frameworks. But I'll let Steve introduce himself properly first.
Hi, thank you, Duncan, and thank you for inviting me today. My apologies that unfortunately I couldn't be here in person, but it's looking like a great agenda and an exciting agenda for everyone. For those people who don't know me, as Duncan's just said, East Riding Yorkshire Council, where I have about 4 teams, 5 people work for me, covering a range of activities. I have 2 procurement teams who are heavily involved in YORhub. I have a health and safety, construction health and safety team, CDM regulations, etc. So digital technology is quite important to us in that respect, and keeping records of site inspections for when, if the HSE decides to ask us, have we been checking contractors are doing what they should be doing. And I also have a commercial team that has finance people, marketing people for YORhub, performance people, etc. in there. So that's my day job. I'm the lead officer for the YORhub frameworks. I'm also chair of the Local Government Association Construction Steering Group, which I will call LGA from now on. So you've been warned what that stands for. Back to you, Duncan.
Okay, thanks very much for that introduction, Steve. So, lots of reasons, places, opportunities where the golden thread will be of interest to you and to East Riding and to the wider frameworks of YORhub and the National Association of Construction Frameworks. So lots of places that we can probably touch upon. Thinking about the golden thread, our theme for this afternoon, but what would you say is the breadth and the depth of the information that actually contributes to the golden thread? And that might be just your first thoughts, the most immediate bits, or some of the more lateral or esoteric bits that actually would contribute to a golden thread for you as a local authority.
Yeah, it's a huge area, isn't it? Because you're starting from the initial ideas of design, looking at risks, looking at mitigation. It's making sure that all materials of a building are known about and their properties. One thing that I'm quite keen on, which I don't think is particularly mentioned, is looking at modern slavery aspects. Because one of the difficulties is we all have a modern slavery statement, or most companies do, of a certain size, and we have to show how we're dealing with that and making sure it's not in our supply chain. And to me, that should be part of the digitalisation of data, and helping us see where all our equipment or all our supply chains are putting out materials, etc., products, and the rest of it. So it's you're moving from that area to the thing I think we're all familiar with in checking methods of work on site, etc., to sort of how buildings are working, to soft landings, to the handover. And it even links to areas like emergency climate change. Most councils are signed up to emergency climate change, and so they're looking at sort of net zero, carbon reduction, how they meet those areas. But when you look at digitisation of data and what you can do with it, and soft landings, which is all part of the golden thread requirements, that's an important part of us going forward and dealing with carbon reduction, especially in the whole life cycle of buildings and how we manage them, how we manage the assets. And for me, one of the issues for local authorities is actually understanding the data and the information we need, what we actually do with the data, having staff with the right skill set, having the right hardware and software, and even transferring it from various systems and various places where we can obtain that data into our systems and making use of it going forward, Duncan.
Okay, that's really good. So following on from that, would you say that actually the management of the information associated with a golden thread is actually kind of the management of everything around the operations of the council?
Yes, I would say it is, and I think one of the issues we have is making sure that councils have top level support and that sort of the chief exec, the directors are involved and having the strategic view going forward of why we need this data and how we're going to use it across the various sections of the council, you know, from the asset management side to the delivery side to even planning, etc. So yeah, agree with that.
So I suppose then, continuing with that theme with chief execs or whatever, that having the ability to display that data as dashboards or as some sort of simplified message that they can see the highlights, the lowlights, the trends for the operation of their portfolio is key.
Yeah, it's one of the things with presentations. I think traditionally we all had a sort of death by PowerPoint, didn't we? Lots of slides, lots of bullet points that don't really make an impact. And I would agree that actually having dashboards, having charts can carry a lot more weight and carry more information and make a better impression on what's happening and where we want to go than other forms. Yeah.
Okay, so starting to drill down a bit then into asset data across the life cycle of an asset, do you think that it's going to be the design and construction phase data that's most important to you, or the operational phase data?
Yeah, it depends which team you're talking of. I would say long term, it's the operational of the data. It's what we do with it. Assuming I'm understanding you correctly, it's about digital twins, the soft landings, the digital twins, how you manage the asset, the building. Because when you're looking at whole life costings, I suspect everyone here has seen the diagram where the original cost is a fraction of the total cost of the building, and the cost of the building, a big part of that is obviously the running of it, the heating of it, the electricity, and currently that is just going up, isn't it, with problems for oil, gas, etc. So the real gains is how you manage the building, and also when you're looking to do work on it in the future, when you're doing refurbishments, extensions, etc. It's the data, it's having the data to allow you to do that and know what you're dealing with.
So taking that point further, and you mentioned fuel costs, do you think that the golden thread at an operational stage will help local authorities to deliver best value with the limited funds that they have available?
Yeah, definitely, and it's I mean the golden thread itself. I mean just to flag up. I mean obviously I'm fully aware of Grenfell, and the main reason for the golden thread is the protection of people, making sure we have safe buildings in the construction of them and in the running of them, and that they're suitable for purpose and people are safe who are in them. But from the point of view of ours, it is what we can do with that data. And so, what was the question again?
So, in the context of the golden thread and the budgetary constraints that local authorities, councils are under, particularly as you mentioned over fuel prices, do you see that the information you can get from a golden thread can actually help the authority to manage its wider budgets?
Yes, but it's part of it is the knowledge and making use of the consultants we use, the contractors they use, and the what they already have in place. And one of the groups that I'm connected to, which is part of Centre for Digital Built Britain, is the local authorities working group that sits there. And they've already done a number of papers on that, on sort of BIM generally. It was one of their first ones back in around 2020 on soft landings, because it's not about us having the hardware and the software necessarily to do everything, because most contractors that I work with, that they have the knowledge and they have all the right kit. The consultants are the same. So it's more local authorities knowing what to ask for in the scope, what the outputs are from schemes, and making sure those outputs match the skill set that they have. So it's a little bit back to basics. But as we all know, you can have those outputs on a spreadsheet. And if you're a smaller authority, that might be the best form for you. If you're a larger authority and you're fully geared up with full design packages, then you can have it in a more complicated form. So it's really having a full information and appreciation of what you already have and what you need and what you can make use of. So there isn't necessarily much additional costs, I would say, Duncan. It's actually an understanding of the processes behind it, and that's really what we're trying to do with the local authorities working group that are part of Digital Build Britain. And to help with their work, it's actually, and I don't think we've had you may have had the news release when you have this presentation, but we're about to transfer over from Digital Build Britain to the LGA, and that's partly to help the communications of it to local authorities, because they've done some really good papers, but it's getting that information cascaded down to the authorities at the fore is quite difficult. And by transferring the group to the LGA and working under the LGA going forward, but it's the same people involved, that will help with those communications. So a first for you ahead of the official announcement in a few weeks.
That's good to know that all the valuable work from CDBB, another of their work streams, is continuing to move forward. So yeah, it will be useful and good to see the work with the Local Government Association going forward. Thanks for that. So we've talked about the data that arises from the design, the construction, the operation of an asset. But local authorities are collecting lots of other data from other parts of their organisation, from other departments. Do you see the value in adding those data sets together to try and get even more insights? And do you have any examples perhaps where that might be happening?
I think at the moment, I'm probably more aware of where it's not happening, unfortunately, than where it is happening. As you say, local authorities have an awful lot of data across their various departments, and they have access to other data, some in the public arena, I suppose, out there, and some possibly that isn't. And the difficulty, and it comes back to the early comment I made of the importance of involving chief execs, directors, and having a strategic plan, is that you can have different departments who are very skilled in this area, know exactly what they're doing, and are collecting data for their department, using it in the best way. But they're not connecting to some other people who are doing it. So you could have some asset people who are keeping everything, maintaining it and making use of it from their perspective, but they're not necessarily talking to, say, the construction teams, the architects, the mechanical engineers, the building surveyors. So they're also could be fully geared up on BIM, doing everything properly, but they may be saving the data in a different way. And both ways can be fully acceptable, but if you try and integrate them, there can be problems. And I think I see that as part of the LGA's work going forward in trying to make those links and those connections in individual councils where it's not happening. But even more importantly, where councils are still quite early on this journey, that we can actually give them some efficiencies by making sure they are doing the joined up thinking.
Okay, and do you see that extending even as wide as local health authority NHS data or other sorts of social data that, and perhaps transport data that might help the local authority operate as well?
Yeah, definitely. We work quite closely with the health sector, so that's not a difficult one. Transport as well. Local authorities do work with different transport systems, the railways, etc. Sort of HGV companies, Freight Transport Association, those sort of companies. So yeah, I think you're right. That will happen in time. And obviously, government's also doing a fair bit of work in this space. Some of it coming from the construction playbook. the original version was published, I think, December 2020, and they're now working on doing a slight revision to that. And part of that work is really looking again how to cascade it down to all government departments, health departments, local authorities, or public sector organisations they work to. And that is linked to various training initiatives as well that they're looking at. So we are getting a fair bit of support from the outsourcing department in government going forward in this area.
That's interesting. You mentioned the construction playbook. Do you think that has been another factor in helping all local authorities and government departments to understand the value of data even more now?
Yes, it's definitely. Although government is having to focus on government departments initially, and they are looking and working with local authorities. But when you look at the number of departments they have, the thousands of people they employ, just training them up and getting them up to speed and making sure all the departments are working in the same way in accordance with the playbook is quite a big task for them. So they're focusing on that. But their training is available to local authorities, and we are working with government, and it has raised it on the agenda. I mean, that's the great thing about the construction playbook. It covers so many digital type areas, and they're doing an awful lot there. And you're right, it's flagged it up, and it's moved us all along. So it's been great to have that in place.
Very good. Okay, that's good to know. So, if we're going to start on a digital thread journey, where should it be? In the words of Julie Andrews, do we start at the beginning or at the middle or at the end? Where do you think either the quickest wins, those low-hanging fruit phrases that people use, or where is the best bang for your buck? Where do you think we should be starting, or should an organisation start with a goal, with trying to develop a golden thread?
Yeah, I think it varies, and I know this might sound a cop-out, but it does vary depending on the organisation, because we all have different sort of pros and cons, if you like, and if some organisations are very good in some areas and not so good in others, and some it's the other way around. So it really comes back to an overall strategy. We all know where we want to end up. When you look at the golden thread and you look at the advantages of having all the data there, understanding how you can use it, it's there to hand. That's sort of the end of the journey. The first bit is, where are you now as an organisation? What knowledge base have you got? What skills have you got? Do you know all the data you've got? Have you got it stored in the most appropriate way? Is it accessible to the people it needs to be? And I think you need to do that sort of analysis at the moment to see where you are. Then think about where you want to end up. And then, as you've just said, are there some easy wins? And that will vary from organisation to organisation. And there should be easy wins for most organisations. So it's for them, once they know the position they're in now, they can work out where the easy wins and do them in the first instance, and look at progressing the sort of harder areas for them. And that won't be the same for each council or each private sector organisation. We're all in a different position.
No, I understand that. Taking your point very much that you need to have a strategy in place to understand the whys and the whats that you want to do with this golden thread, where would you signpost people to? So where would you signpost organisations, whether they're public or private sector, as kind of that first place to start and look? Is there a document? Is there a website? Where would they go for information?
I think for local authorities, I don't know whether you've seen it, Duncan, there was a Soft Landings Interactive Navigator done as part of the Centre for Digital Built Britain for the Local Authorities Working Group, and that was endorsed by the LGA. And that's quite nicely laid out, and I think that would be a good starting point. There's also some training being developed funded by government that I was part of one of the development groups that isn't out there yet, because they're still finishing off the slides and putting it on the web. And that actually takes you through the full process So the slides for it, there's about 90 odd slides. I don't know how that will look on a web basis, and it could be a lot less, it could be a lot more, depending how they develop it. But it actually it takes you through the whole journey, and it's really good. And that should be out there hopefully in the next few months. So that would be where I will be directing people in the future, because that's set up for local authorities in particular, funded by government. So that is to be published in the next few months. But having seen the initial slide deck, it is a great piece of work that's been very, very well done, and that should be the starting point for most of us.
So, building safety bill. Now, potentially this could be seen as a carrot or as a stick for the industry in relation to the creation of a digital thread. What would you see as your views on that?
Yeah, I think very much it's well timed for local authorities, and from our point of view, we've actually been heavily involved in it. Following Grenfell, the LGA were actually on a number of the committees, so we've been working closely with them on all aspects of it, including the golden thread. And unfortunately, sometimes you do need the stick. With austerity and other issues, local authorities do struggle to invest in various areas at the moment, and having it in legislation that we've got to look at building information, make sure we're creating and storing it throughout the building life cycle is important. And it does make us think of such areas as showing that we're complying with building regulations throughout design and construction, identifying and mitigating building safety risks. And it's not just that we do that, because of course we do as local authorities, but it's keeping the records of that. So I think it's a great initiative from that point of view, and it is something we're looking at. We actually, at our annual conference, the LGA conference in February this year, we had a presentation from Camilla Sheldon, who's Deputy Director of the Building Safety Reform at the Department of Levelling Up and other bits and pieces. It's a long title. And they went through the various requirements of the building safety bill, including the golden thread, because part of my responsibilities as chair of the LGA Construction Steering Group is making sure that relevant information is cascaded to our members, to the sort of 343 councils in the country. And so that's part of the work we're doing to make sure that local authorities are aware of the golden thread requirements.
Okay. Thank you very much, Steve. That's been really good. Always great to chat. We kept ourselves on topic as well. We didn't disappear off into running, but hey ho, there's always time for that another day. But thank you very much for your time today, and we're very pleased that we can have this recording to share at thinkBIM in the event itself. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, Duncan. And I know you're going to have a great event. And I'm just sorry I couldn't be there on the day, but I'm looking forward to attending a future one.
Thanks very much, Steve. Cheers.
Yeah, bye.